And we are live. Hello and happy Thursday. It's so good to be here again. Welcome to Get Paid, the profitable advantage of inclusive diversity. Such an important subject this week, and I think we should probably just jump in. So here's what's happening. And I'm sorry, everybody. Hello to Deb.
Hi.
I'm really excited about this subject because Deb and I have been talking about this a lot. And so as we have, as the last 15 months has really amplified this phenomenon. But even before then, companies would bring in a DEI professional, or they would elevate someone in their company. And generally it was a person of color, and more frequently than not, it was a woman of color into a role of DEI. And so then we fast forward to last year and the emphasis on inclusion and diversity and equity in corporations. And every day there was a different announcement of a new, chief diversity officer with a different company, and lots of promotions and appointments. And as we were talking, I said, Deb, over the last 15 months, so many people have been elevated, and you are recruiting for these roles. How did all of these people get all of the training that they needed to become these DEI professionals? And now that they've been appointed, are they successful? Are they being given the support that they need to make the impact? And how is that affecting their profession, right? How is that affecting their career? If they were on one track and they've been pulled over to be in DEI, if they're not getting the support over here, how is that affecting their career? So we said, let's talk about that. So let's talk about it. Deb.
Yep. So
go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I've been looking at this, and we'll talk about it kind of in two parts. And we'll start with the person, the employee, the person who's gotten this opportunity, particularly, like you said, in the last, I'd say like 8 to 12 months, where we've seen a lot of activity where companies in good faith are, whether it was George Floyd or something else that happened within the organization, are saying, okay, now maybe we weren't doing this before, but now we're going to do it. And so somebody gets placed into a role, which is an amazing opportunity. But then when you have that role, if you're the employee, we're going to start there, kind of what's important for you to keep top of mind as you go on your own journey.
That's right.
And I think the very first thing is get your feet wet first. So, you may not have come out of the DEI space, right? So you might have been promoted, like you said, from a different function, from something even unrelated to human resources. So look for some allies to support you, but look for some easy wins, a little bit of low-hanging fruit. So if, for example, you don't have a diversity council yet, maybe that's something you want to put in place, do some research, ask some peers in other companies, and maybe you can put something quick in place that gives you kind of an easy win.
So here's a question. So you mentioned human resources. Oftentimes what we're seeing is people who are in business units, and they might be at a manager's level. They are then given this title of VP of DE&I, and it's in human resources. So here are two questions for me. A, if you take someone from a business unit, it makes sense to me because you're trying to get DEI throughout the whole company. But then why do you move DEI to human resources? Why is that the home for DEI, a DEI professional?
Well, I think it depends on the company. I mean, in some companies, the DEI will report in through the CEO. There are companies where the head will report in, but a lot of times when companies are first starting out, and there's has happened in the last 12 months, they will start with human resources because there are adjacencies there, right? So there's recruiting that's related to diversity efforts. There's training and development, and those things do fall under human resources. So oftentimes it will be placed there. And people will come out. Sometimes they come up through HR. Sometimes, like you said, they come out of the business. And I think it's important for the person, especially if they come out of the business, to be thinking ahead for themselves, saying, okay, if I've taken this role and it is in human resources and it has an opportunity to grow, what other skills can I get so that my career continues on this track? Or am I doing this for just a skill add for right now, and then I want to go back to the function I was in before? And that's a conversation that you have to have with your supervisor or the person who's putting you into that role, so you have a sense of where you go from there.
So here's my next question then. If it's in human resources, and the one thing that we always talk about, and I talk about with my clients when I'm doing this work with other businesses, is that there is a profitable advantage in human resources. If it's put in human resources, does that take away from the understanding that it should be throughout the company and there is a profitable advantage? Or is it just seen as, this is how we're going to recruit? This is how, I just want to get to the bottom of that, because I really think it's important for leaders to understand that wherever you put this person, they need to have the support so that they can influence the entire company.
Yeah, that's less about whether it is under human resources and more about the company itself. Because the company itself, it shouldn't matter where you sit. It's like when a person reports into the line versus into HR. In companies that are well functioning, it doesn't matter, because if the relationships are there, if the human resources department is respected, if the leader in that role is supportive, it should be irrelevant. But am I going to say, are there companies where HR isn't respected and therefore whatever goes under HR isn't going to be respected? Yes, but that's less about that than it speaks to the whole company and how they value many things related to people. So I don't think it's so much directly about HR.
Okay, that's good. I just want to be sure that we talk about that, because oftentimes you get this big title and then you're just kind of put in the corner. So the company can say, hey, we're addressing DEI. We just hired this very expensive, chief DEI officer. And then what do you do next? Because if you haven't been able to be effective, then what are you putting on your resume?
Yeah, and I think it's important, if you're going to take a role like that you look at what is the history. So if a company has been doing this work in some way before the last 12 months, it's easier to see kind of where they're heading. If it's a recent one, you have to ask the questions about what their plans are and how does your career fit in, so that you try to make the best decision possible. And sometimes you do, unfortunately, get a company where maybe their intentions were good, but at the end of the day, it doesn't pan out. But I think most companies want to do this for the right reasons. But you as the employee really have to think about, okay, how does this fit into my overall career plan?
Right. So now, so we've talked about the employee. Let's flip it. Let's talk about the employer. What do employers need to do to make sure that if you're bringing someone in, they have the right support to be successful?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I want to start with the people who get promoted first as someone in, because when you do promote somebody, if they don't have any experience in the space, you have to be really clear with what the expectations are for somebody who's learning on the job. What are you going to do to support that person in their learning? So are you going to send them to conferences? You're going to let them get some training outside of the office? Are they going to get to network with other companies? Like, people only know what they know. So you have to be thoughtful and you have to be willing to give people time and resources to learn on the job. So that the employer has to do. Otherwise, you're just throwing somebody into a job and seeing if they sink or swim. And if they've never done it before, chances are they're going to sink. So I think having that educational support and thoughtfulness around how long this is really going to take is critical.
Yeah.
If you're bringing somebody in from the outside, I think it is incumbent upon you to really honestly and transparently talk about where you are in the journey at the company, what's come before, what you expect to happen after, and how you're going to support this person's full career, so that they don't feel like they're just being put into something that's sort of by itself, especially if it doesn't have a big team yet. Sometimes you put people in to start and let them grow a team. So if they're starting off either by themselves or with just maybe one other person on their team, letting them know that you have a plan for them that's not just short-sighted.
Yeah, unfortunately, most of the people that I've spoken to or come into contact with my job, I've been the support to them because they've been brought in, but then there really isn't a team for them. So I think that's a really important point. You can't do the work by yourself.
Right. And especially so bringing in somebody like you is a great idea if you have somebody with less experience in particular, because you can add that knowledge and support as the person kind of brings themselves up to speed. And then perhaps they do get a small team and then you sort of drop off. But I think that whatever the company can do to educate and give external knowledge to somebody is only going to be good for everybody involved.
What do you think some of the challenges are for employers to really understand how to do what you just very clearly explained? When we're not seeing that happen, what do you think that challenge, why do you think it is? Beyond maybe it's not a true commitment, but maybe there are people who want to be committed, but they just don't know how to do the right thing.
Well, I do think it's a little bit of you don't know what you don't know. It's like they know enough to say, I support the effort. I want my company to be inclusive. I want people to feel like we are considering, everybody and not being biased and not being exclusive, but they don't know how. So, I think, if you don't have the internal expertise or you're not bringing somebody in who has like years of experience, because there are people out there who like yourself or other people who can come into a company and said, hey, I've done this in 2 or 3 other companies, because there's many companies out there who've been doing this work for years.
Right.
So I would say either maybe bring a consultant in if you're really new to this to help you map out what really needs to happen, whether that be training related, communications related, marketing related, like have somebody with expertise come in and work alongside your resource to kind of get you up to speed and help you come up with a plan. Because I think the challenge really is the intent is there, but you just don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so what's the bottom line, Deb?
So I think the bottom line is if you're in a role like this, it's a fantastic opportunity. Use it to your advantage to really make some quick wins and then think about your long-term career. How can you add skills? How can you really add value to the organization beyond where the work starts? Because this has many opportunities. DEI is not just about one thing. It's about all of the organization. So how can you help yourself and the organization? Mm-hmm. And then the other bottom line for companies is you have to support the people in the roles. You have to hold them up to be able to do their work, whether that means with external support, with training, or internal marketing. You have to really help them to make this a wonderful function within your organization.
That's great. Thank you. And I hope that was really helpful to everyone who's joined us, or if you're watching it later. This is a really important subject, DEI, right? DEI in corporations, and how do you get the success? How do you get the support for the success? And so next week, we continue this conversation, but we're going to talk about the role and the burden of IRGs and DEI councils within the corporate structure. So we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Come with your questions, comments, and we're going to be here same time next Thursday, 11 o'clock. And again, just so you know, we're going to be talking about the role and burden of IRGs and DEI councils in the corporate workplace. So take care. Have a great week.
Bye.
And we look forward to seeing you guys next week.